Hello everyone and welcome to the fifth leg of the Grand Chess Tour. It's the Sinquefield Cup and here we have Nepomniachtchi with the white pieces against Viswanathan Anand. Now the pairings here will be the same as in Zagreb, only with the colors reversed. So whoever got the black pieces in Zagreb will have the white pieces here. And the players will be battling it out for, the prize fund is $325,000 with $90,000 for first place, which is a lot more than, for example, when Jobava now won the Abu Dhabi Masters. He only won $13,000 for first place. But okay, this is a much bigger tournament and they have Rex Sinquefield sponsoring them. The time limit is 130 minutes per player and they will have a 30-second delay starting from move 1. Now, Carlsen just had a pretty bad event in the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz tournament, but this is classical chess. And a lot of you say that why I never say what the time format is in the video, but the time format will always be in the description if I don't mention it, and I will always mention the time format at the start of the video. But here Carlsen starts with his, I believe, 2882 rating, or 28, yeah, I think it's 2882, and or maybe 2880 something. But he will be now trying to reach 2900 for the first time ever in classical chess, but he has to really perform spectacularly to achieve such a, to break the threshold. But okay, getting back to the game, Nepomniachtchi with the white pieces opens with c4. So the English is on the board. We have e5 and knight to c3, the reversed Sicilian variation of the English. With bishop to b4, knight to d5 now, pushing the bishop back to e7, and here knight to f3. With d6 by Anand, and then now comes d4. And here a lot of moves have been tried. e4 has been played here, c6 has been played here, pawn captures here, knight c6 has been played, knight d7 has been played. But the move Anand plays knight to f6 is a new move, and it's very interesting. Already as of move 6, we have a completely new game. With knight back to c3 by Nepo, and now e captures on d4. Knight captures on d4, and now d5, getting rid of the, well, maybe a backwards pawn in the future. Why not just push it right away? Bishop to f4 by Nepo, and now comes castles. And here e3 by Nepo. Knight to b5 seems like you're creating some threats here against the c7 pawn, but black can just play a6. And if you capture on c7, you actually lose material. Bishop b4 check. If you don't want to lose the queen, you have to block with the bishop, but then the knight on c7 is unguarded, so you just capture and then pick up the piece. So not possible with e3 by Nepo, and now Anand plays a6, preventing any knight b5 action in the future. Knight back to f3, and now c6, strengthening the center. Nepo trades ones with c captures, knight captures, queen captures, and here Nepo trades queens with queen captures, c captures, and finally a queenside castle attacking the pawn here. Now, as Anand achieved a new position here, it is likely that he has this all analyzed, and the d5 pawn is under attack. Now, if you defend it with the bishop to e6, you're gonna get knight d5, the bishop will be under attack, and in a position like this, you do want to keep the bishop pair. So Anand defends it with knight to c6, and now if you capture the pawn, now you get bishop to e6, where you have to move the rook. Then comes bishop captures on a2, and the white king will be under a lot of pressure here. The bishop can come to f6, and it's not going to be easy defending. So Nepo here tries bishop to g5. He wants to trade bishops and then maybe have his knight on g5 already guarding the e6 square. Anand pushes it back with f6, bishop to f4, and only now bishop to e6, defending it now that his f6 pawn defends from any infiltration of the knight. Also, the knight from c6 guards d4. With king to b1, you know that Anand is developing the rook to c8, so why not just get rid of the king right away. Rook a c8, and now a3, taking away the b4 square from Anand's pieces. With rook f to d8, now developing the last rook, and here bishop to d3. You might want to, it's usually the case where you want to blockade the isolated pawn and then attack it later, but here you don't have anything to blockade it with. If knight here, then black can just capture it, and if rook recaptures, the rook is not a good blockading piece in most cases. So here, bishop to d3, Nepo continues development, and now bishop to c5. With king rook h to e1, again developing the last rook, and king f7. Anand now starts to bring the king into the game. with bishop to g3, and now bishop back to b6, opening up the c file for the rook, and here comes a bishop to c2. Nepo does the same, with h5, preparing g5 and h4, and h3, making room for the bishop on h2 if needed, and now knight to e7. Anand now prepares not that, knight to f5 to harass the bishop, and well, whoever wins the bishop pair here should have the advantage. With bishop to b3, here Nepo is trying to get Anand to go for the bishop. For example, if knight to f5 here, bishop f4, and if g5 now, here Nepo had bishop captures on g5 planned to give up the piece for 3 pawns. After pawn captures, knight captures with check, king moves wherever, king f6, king e7, now you capture, and after king captures, now you push e4 as the d5 pawn is pinned. And now after the knight moves, knight d6, you're gonna capture here, you have 3 pawns for the piece, most likely you're gonna grab more pawns, and Anand doesn't like this. So first Anand prepares knight f5, he plays g5, now bishop to f4 will no longer be possible. But first we have h4. Again, knight f5 can now be met with h captures on g5, and then the g5 square will once again be weak. So here Anand just pushes g4. We have knight to d4, and now Anand decides to give up the dark square bishop. With bishop captures on d4, rook captures on d4, and now knight to c6, pushing the rook back. With rook back, rook to f4 now. Seems like an odd place to put the rook, but if it works, you know, black doesn't really seem to have a way of attacking it. And now d4, Anand trades the other bishop as well. With bishop captures, king captures, and now e captures on d4, temporarily sacrificing a pawn. You can't go here because you have to keep an eye on the f6 pawn, so Anand goes back, king to f7, and now you could try to defend it, but defending it gives black a lot of activity. For example, if rook d1, then rook knight e7, preparing to harass the rook, and also rook c4 is coming, where you will attack the pawn once again. And now after f3, knight d5, you push back the rook, rook e4, and g captures on f3 now. G captures, rook g8, this is what black would play if white tried to defend the pawn, and now black's rooks are really just, you know, a powerhouse, and white's rooks are stuck guarding the d4 pawn. So Nepo doesn't enjoy this, he tries to give back the pawn, he plays f3, and okay, we have g captures, rook captures, and now knight captures on d4. Grabbing back the pawn, Nepo goes rook to f4, and we have knight to e6 back, attacking the rook. Rook back to f3, and now again knight to d4. We have rook to f4, and here Nepo is saying, okay, if you want to draw, you can go for a threefold repetition with knight to e6, but here Anand says, no way, knight to b3, he says no draw. Anand says that his position is better and that he will continue playing this game. Because he has a knight against a bishop, and usually a bishop will be better if it's, if a game is being played on both sides of the board, but Anand's pawns are on light squares, so he doesn't have to worry about the bishop all that much, and well, he says that he's the only one who can push for more than a draw in this position. With bishop to f2 by Nepo, and now rook to c4, a very nice idea where Anand finds a way to get rid of a pair of rooks. So here, rook captures, knight d2 check, with king to c2, and now knight picks up the rook. So Anand says his knight is better than the bishop here, and he would like to exchange rooks. We have rook to e2, preventing rook d2 check, and now comes knight back to e5. We have bishop to e1, and now comes king to e6, further improving the position. Anand now wants to get king f5, king g4, and go after the g2 pawn. We have a4 by Nepo, rook to d6 now, and now g3. We have king to f5, now the g4 square is available for the king. Rook f2 check, king g4, and now rook to f4 check with king to h3. And here Anand's king would be, well, in somewhat of a danger if, for example, Nepo had a knight against the bishop. But since he's on a light square, he doesn't have all that much to worry about, and Nepo will have to keep an eye on the g3 pawn for a very long time. And here, rook f5 with an attack against the h5 pawn would have been Nepo's best move. He went rook to f1. And he allowed rook c6 check with king to b1 now, and now rook back to e6. Now comes rook to f5, so the idea is the same, only he wasted some time. But now he gets knight to g6, and he asks, well, do you want to grab a pawn and then I win your piece? Of course, he doesn't want that, with bishop to f2, and now king to g4, defending the pawn. rook back to d5, and now knight to e5 again. We have rook to d4 check, king to h3, and now rook back to d5, and here rook to e7. Just keeping an eye on all the pawns here. He wants to play rook h7. The rook from h7 will be keeping an eye on the b7 pawn and on the h5 pawn. So king to c2, trying to get the king into the game. If rook d6 attacking the pawn, knight g4 just defends it while attacking the bishop. So king c2, we have knight to g4 attacking the bishop, and the bishop back to b6. So now you have to leave the g3 pawn undefended. But your h5 pawn is also undefended. So first rook to h7, and now rook to d3. Both players now defend their pawns. Knight to e5, trying to get the rook away from the defense of the g3 pawn. Rook to b3, and now comes rook to d7. We have bishop back to e3, and now knight to f3. Now you are ready to capture the pawn, as well, white doesn't really have all that many discoveries. We have rook to b6, and now king captures on g3. We have rook captures on f6, and now knight captures on h4. Anand wins the pawn, and now Anand just wants to get rid of the knight and start pushing his passed pawn. We have b4 by Nepo, and now comes knight to g2. The pawn is now ready to be pushed. We have bishop to a7, preparing bishop to b8 check, and now h4. We have king to c3, and now h3. Preparing h2 and h1 queen. So bishop to b8 check by Nepo, king to g4, and now rook to g6 check. We have king to h5, and now rook back to g8. We have knight to e3, going for knight to g4, so the h2 push will be protected by the knight. We have rook to g3, now with a double attack, and now knight d5 check first. We have king back to b3, and now king to h4, defending the pawn. Rook back to g8, and now knight to f6, again attacking the rook. If you go rook h8 check, rook h7, it's not a problem. So here rook to g6 by Nepo, attacking the knight, and now knight to g4. We have rook to g8, and now you can't push the pawn right away because h8 check, and both the rook and the bishop attack the pawn. So rook to h7 first. You have to put a rook behind a passed pawn, and now Nepo starts bringing the king into the game. King c4 with h2. Anand could prepare this push a bit more, but he's very low on the clock, and he decides that he's ready to win Nepo's bishop. With h2, bishop captures on h2, knight captures on h2, and now b5. Nepo wants to trade off all the pawns and then hold a draw with rook against the rook and knight. We have knight to g4 by Anand, and now rook to a8. We have a captures, a captures on b5, we have king captures on b5, and now comes knight to f6. So if Nepo can get rid of this pawn, it will be very good for him. We have a5, knight to d5, and now rook to a7. And here Anand plays king to g5, so he has to keep this pawn protected and bring his king closer so he can start with winning the a5 pawn and then trying to push for more. And here the problem is you cannot push a6. If you push a6 to trade off the last pawn, you get knight c7 check, and after king b6 you get b captures on a6, and the pawn is now nicely protected by the knight. If you capture, black just captures the rook, and if you decide to win a piece, then the problem is you can never catch up to the a pawn. The a pawn is faster, and you get a queen. Here, after king g5, Nepo had to play king to c5, but he played a different move. He played king to c4, and here it just doesn't work. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find the winning move for Anand in this position while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an excellent punisher of blunders by a white. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, here Anand played b5 check, and it was in this position that Nepo resigned the game. Why did he resign? Well, of course, you all saw it. After king captures on d5, you win a knight, but then you get the rook captures on a7. The rook is now undefended, and now, of course, it's a completely winning endgame. On the other hand, if you play a captures on b5, you get rid of check while defending your rook. It seems like white defense, but your problem is knight captures on b6 with check. Rook is once again undefended, and after king b5, you're going to capture the rook. Captures, you're going to move the rook, and now, of course, the rook and king endgame against king is completely winning. So yeah, after this b5 move, Nepo resigns, and Anand wins the first game of the tournament. And Anand is the only Anand is the only player who won his game in round 1 of the Sinquefield Cup, which is a bit different. In Zagreb, I think there were 4 or even 5 decisive games in round 1, or maybe 3, but definitely more than 1. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Nepo versus Anand, round 1 of the Sinquefield Cup. I would like to thank Jeff Graves and Marco Feist for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the Sinquefield Cup, continuing the Capablanca saga, and of course checking up on your suggestions. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Sunday. And if you use Discord, do join our Discord server. The link will be in the description below. See you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.